Welcome to the second week of the second term of Donald Trump, the golden age of America. Now, I spent yesterday making a list of his first week achievements because it's kind of crazy how much he got done in 1 week. And the week ended on Sunday night at midnight. So it's got to be done by Sunday. Can't count today. Don't know what he did today. Well, I do, but doesn't count for the first week. Number one, the inaugural address, the Golden Age of America address. That was fabulous. Number two, the address to those assembled in Davos, and especially the Q&A with the Bank of America president. That was fabulous. Number three, President Trump has laid down a marker for every NATO country, and that includes the United States. 5% GDP goes to defense spending. That would mean a $1.45 trillion defense budget. And I'm all for it because, boy, do we need to do it. And that's a big lift to House Speaker Johnson and Leader Scalise down in Florida leading the Florida retreat of the House GOP. You need some revenue. I'm going to post some revenue ideas over at X. Get it done. Number four, I'm doing this slow, but I'm doing a baker's dozen. And for the benefit of the Steelers fans out there, that means 13 things. Right? A baker's dozen is 13. And people in Pittsburgh are confused. They thought a dozen was 12, and that's okay. We love you, WPIT listeners. Number four, the executive order removing the DEI stuff. Just killing it. I'll talk with Juan Williams later in the program about this. I think it's a great day for America. As Chief Justice Roberts said in 2007, the way to end discrimination based on race is to end discriminating based on race. Still the same. It's been 19 years since he wrote that. I guess it's 18 years. In the Seattle School District case from 2007, this DEI does that. Amen. Number five, ICE is unleashed on evil people. I mean, they're going everywhere fast, and they're picking up bad actors everywhere, and they're going to send them back, and they're going to make sure they get sent back. Number six, with regard to number five, Colombia's president says we're not taking them back. Donald Trump throws down a 50% tariff on Colombia products. That was over so fast it didn't even make a news cycle. Colombia, caved. We had this president with a sash talking trash. And Colombia's a good friend of ours, or has been. They got this wacko for a president now, and he wasn't going to take their nationals who are in our country illegally, refused to allow 2 military planes full of bad hombre Colombians to land. Well, Donald Trump didn't take but a minute to say, okay, 50% tariff on your coffee, etc. They crumbled. And that is a message, by the way, that resonates with every other country that we're going to send a flight to. We are the United States. We are the biggest economy in the world. And we will stop you sending your stuff here, and we will crush your economies if you don't take your bad actors back. Good for Donald Trump. Number six, both his visits to North Carolina and California to meet with victims of natural disasters. And included in this is the dressing down he gave to everyone in California about the mismanagement of the water, about people's private property and not letting them go clean up. It rained here. I'm in California teaching this semester. It rained here all weekend. And if those people had been allowed back in their houses a week ago, it would have been easier to find precious possessions, but rain makes it harder. Maybe they got in on Saturday before the rain came. Donald Trump got Karen Bass back way up. Not about the government doing this. It's about people taking care of themselves. And then you can come along later, preposition some dumpsters if you want, but get it done. It was a great day. And he's conditioning aid to California on fixing our water supply and fixing our voting. Because I'm here. I haven't lived in California as a resident since 2015, but I'm a Virginian. I'm here right now, and it was broken when I left, and it's worse now. Number nine, Donald Trump says, I'd like one big, beautiful bill, but I need the tax cuts. I don't care how they get it done. I need the tax cuts. I need a bunch of things. One big, beautiful bill, 2 bills, don't care, agnostic, up to you. Speaker Johnson, up to you. Majority Leader Thune. But I like that. I like that he's not trying to drive the Congress. He's telling them what they need to get done. Number 10, ending remote work for federal employees. Now, I know of which I speak here. I was the acting director of the Office of Personnel Management for the entire federal government under Ronald Reagan. Before that, I was confirmed as the deputy director of OPM. Before that, I was its general counsel. I know OPM. I know the federal workforce. Remote work is a nightmare that can and is abused. Exceptions can be made. But first, you got to get everyone back into the rhythm. And the rhythm has got to be go to work. There's an office or a desk or a cubicle waiting for you. And we don't know what you're doing at home. And we want you in that cubicle, and we don't want you surfing. We want you answering the phone for people who need to know things about Medicare or about Social Security or whatever it is you're doing, federal bureaucrat. We're glad you're doing it until you get fired because you're not doing a good job. But that was great. Number 11, Donald Trump withdrew from the Paris Climate Accords, which are nuts. Just a big old reward to the Chi-Coms. And from the WHO, which helped the Chi-Coms cover up the virus that leaked from the lab. That was a big deal. Number 12, the big AI push. Larry Ellison, Sam Altman, and SoftBank, $1 trillion going into AI. And by the way, the markets are getting crashed right now because the Chi-Coms came up with a cheap AI model, and it's got the NVIDIA people and a bunch of big tech folks worried. And then 13, that's the baker's dozen, the Birthright Citizenship Executive Order. Now, I happen to believe if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. And that was the plain meaning and the tradition and practice of our country from 1868 forward. But I also know it's not been asked and answered by the Supreme Court. It will be now. And it will end the ongoing, never-ending small group of scholars committed to the idea that just because you're born here, if you're born to parents who are in the country illegally, if you're born to illegal aliens, you're not a legal citizen. I don't think that's the correct point of view, but I do think Donald Trump setting it up for a quick decision is a very good thing, a very good thing. And I that's 13. I haven't even begun to touch it. It's just that great. But since I mentioned the market, let me do the market report brought to you by our friends at American Federal. Nick Grovich and his team, 1-800-520-1234. 1-800-520-1234. I'm trying to bring up my my markets because gold was up again today, but the markets were crashing. And by crashing, I don't mean it's a disaster. I just mean that the new chat box from the Chi-Coms has spooked the markets. And at this hour, they're just, the NASDAQ is down 3.5%. The S&P is down almost 2%. And Dow's just, it's not about big tech. But what does gold do when markets go crazy? Gold's at $2,741 an ounce. Hasn't moved. Might have gone up or down $1, hadn't moved. That's why people have gold. That's why if you're going to buy or sell gold, you do it with AmericanFederal.com. Call Nick Grovich at 800-221-7694. 800-221-7694. Say, Nick, I need to add some gold. And I'm going to add some gold right now. Good for you. Because the markets go up and down. Gold chugs along ahead of inflation. It is the keeper of the value of the dollar. And it will serve you well over a long period of time. For the past 100 years, it has more than kept pace with inflation. $2,741 an ounce isn't what you'll get from Nick and American Federal. You have to pay a commission. If you sell them gold and you send them 5 ounces, they're not going to pay you 5 times 2, 741. They got to make money. But they're honest, transparent, and they're quick. 800-221-7694. Dr. Kevin Roberts is the president of the Heritage Foundation, great sponsor of our show, and he's a good friend of mine. Dr. Roberts, how are you?
Man, I'm always doing well when I'm with you, Hugh. Thanks for everything that you're doing during this really pivotal and exciting time in American history.
Thank you, Kevin. I just ran down a baker's dozens of things that Donald Trump did in his first week. And I'm going to ask you, before I tell you what's on my list, what was your favorite thing that Donald Trump did in week one of the golden age of America?
It's really hard to focus on just one. I gravitate to anything having to do with closing the southern border, but I would have to say tearing out DEI root and branch, not only because it affects every federal agency, but also because I think DEI is just by definition un-American. I think this is the beginning of the American restoration, and we can only achieve that if we get out of the way these nefarious practices that divide rather than unite us.
You know, it was 18 years ago, and I'm going to talk about this with Juan Williams today. It was 18 years ago, the Chief Justice of the United States in the Seattle School District case said, the way to end discrimination based on race is to stop discriminating based on race. He was right then, he's right today, and the president is actually rolling out on this hard. I mean, it was a hard launch.
It really was. And you know, sometimes people will say, particularly if they're my age and older, and I know you have no knowledge of that, being a young, charming man yourself, they will say, well, you know, the country's history does have some warts as it relates to treating people equally. Well, of course it does. But we also, at the same time that we recognize that we've had challenges, can also recognize that this country has many benefits. It has many successes. And one of them, to the point that you just made, is that we have achieved this success. We are still imperfect as a republic because each of us is an imperfect individual. But I think what Trump recognizes is it's time to remember the past is the past, and the American future is one where we can guarantee equality of opportunity while not paying any attention to the immutable differences we all have. That really is the promise of this Trump presidency, leaning, I would argue very fittingly, on the greatest address ever given in modern American history, and that was MLK's address from the Lincoln Memorial in the 1960s.
And he's right back there. And he cited Dr. King on his inauguration day. That was terrific. Now, Dr. Roberts, I want to talk to you especially about the conditions Donald Trump wants to put on California receiving federal aid. And the backdrop to this, I always tell people, I'm an evangelical Roman Catholic Presbyterian who believes in the Constitution. I'm a husband and a father and a grandfather, but I'm a constitutionalist. The federal government has every right to condition relief spending on California repairing the damage. I'm out here for a semester teaching con law. It's broken. Don't you want conditions on federal aid?
I really do. And as you know, I believe I grew up on the Gulf Coast. I remember vividly hurricane recovery after Hurricane Andrew in 1992. The personal anecdote is one that I think is apropos of this situation 3 decades later. We didn't wait in southern Louisiana, where there weren't a whole lot of wealthy people, for the federal government to arrive. But when the federal government arrived, we made sure that the local organizations, the local people, our counties, our civil parishes, and our state had pulled our weight. Also, there weren't state-based policies that were allowed to continue that actually were creating the natural disaster. In the case of California, why should I, as a resident of another state, pay a disproportionate share for the nonsense that California continues to implement, not just on its citizens, but now on all of the American people? In other words, if there aren't conditions on that emergency relief and disaster aid, Hugh, then all of us are going to continue to pay for California to innovate. And of course, those innovations do things like prevent forest management that causes fires. I am so grateful that President Trump has started this revolution of common sense in every respect. But being someone who grew up around natural disasters, obviously in my case, hurricanes rather than forest fires, it's time for California to have to pay its fair share for its stupidity rather than relying on all of the other American taxpayers to do so.
And I want to underscore that. What the president is saying about water management, the Chinook salmon, the Delta smelt is absolutely true. And what he's saying about the bureaucracy in California is absolutely true. And our voting catastrophe, or what is their voting catastrophe. I'm a Virginian now. One more thing I want to cover with you, Kevin Roberts. I used to be the acting director of OPM when Reagan was president, because I'm older than you. I was the deputy director before that, and I was the general counsel before that. Ending remote work is a necessity if the government is going to function at even the capacity of government, which isn't high, but if you allow remote work, it gets worse. Do you agree, and do you want the president to keep pushing on that pedal?
I agree 100% because it's a matter of justice. Only American federal government workers would feel entitled to something that no other workers in our country on this planet would argue they're entitled to. There are some agencies where there have been only 7% of the workers showing up for just once a week. This isn't any way to run a business. It's no way to run a government. Of course, the one downside for those of us who commute from Virginia is that the traffic will be worse. But I do believe that that's a small price to pay for just a matter of justice. I'll relate one personal anecdote. It's been a lot of fun living out in a more rural part of Northern Virginia to overhear in restaurants and in stores bureaucrats complaining that they have to go back to work to actually work. Trump is over the target once again.
Yeah, I spent 6 years as a Fed, and at one point I was living in Great Falls, which is a long way from downtown OPM, about an hour and 15 minutes. It was a stupid move for a young family to move that far out, but you learn by stupid moves. There's just no reason not to have people back in the office. You're also a boss. You run the Heritage Foundation. Do people have to come to work at the Heritage Foundation?
They damn well better if they want to stay employed. And of course, I don't have to say that because Heritage has the best people on the planet. We do a lot of work on the Capitol and around, and obviously we have to do that in person.
A quick last question, Kevin Roberts. Are you draining away all your people into the administration? Because I sure hope so.
Oh, I am. It's bittersweet because we love our people at Heritage, but we also know that's what we're built for. And so our challenge internally is how we get enough people to show up for work because so many are now working for the Trump-Vance administration.
Well, everyone go to heritage.org. Find out what Heritage is doing to help the president launch the golden age of America because it's real and it's happening in real time before us. Dr. Kevin Roberts, thank you. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
You're the best. Thanks, you.
I wish I was the best. I'm not. There are other people who are better at it than I am, but I do believe that heritage.org is a great resource, a place that you absolutely need to go to if you want to be smart. Now, another sponsor of our program, I'm going to leave that aside. I'm just going to brag on Heritage for a second. If you want to be smart, go over to heritage.org and sign up for their newsletter. Rob Bluey is their head of comms. I don't know what his title is now. I hope Rob doesn't go in the government. People want him to go in the government at all times. Don't go in the government, Rob. Stay right where you are because he pushes out good stuff. You want to be smart. Do what I do. Cut off all your subscriptions. I only get the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and news items from John Ellis now, and the Free Press, 4 subscriptions. I'm down. I just tossed everything else out. There's only one real newspaper left in America, and that's the Wall Street Journal. The Financial Times is done out of London. The Free Press is great commentary and analysis, and you got to help Barry Weiss and her gang do what they're doing. And news items from John Ellis is just the summary that I need to be ready for the show every day. But everything else you can get for free at heritage.org. So take advantage of that. Go to heritage.org, get signed up, get their newsletter, get their briefing. I'm trying to figure out what the situation is with the hostages in Israel. I'm lucky to be joined by Dr. Michael Oren, former ambassador from Israel to the United States. Dr. Oren, thank you for joining me today. Israel said, or at least it's been reported in the Times of Israel, Hamas has provided a list of the 26 hostages covered in the first phase, but apparently some of them are dead. What is your understanding of those 26 who remain in phase 1? Up. I think you must be on mute. Dr. Michael Oren, there you are. Frozen in awe of the Hugh Hewitt show, I guess.
Yeah, frozen totally.
But try it again, doctor. No, frozen. We'll figure it back. Let me go and play for you, if I can, in the meantime, a little bit of what happened on J.D. Vance with Margaret Brennan yesterday on the claim that illegals have been vetted. Cut number 5, please, Harley.
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals have been properly vetted.
But there are 30,000 people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary concern as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people are vetted.
Good.
These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted. And because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
Bravo, J.D. Vance, for not putting up with this nonsense. I'm now joined by Dr. Oren, who the internet was not working, so we're just going to have to do it on the phone. How are you, Doctor? Hello, Dr. Oren.
I'm good. I'm sorry, Hugh.
That's okay. We got plenty of time.
Here I am.
There you are. Can you give us an
I can see
update?
me too.
Yeah, that's
You got
good.
me?
Can you give me an update on what the hostage deal situation is right now?
Wayne?
No, he's not hearing us now. Yeah, but whatever is, our system is just not working. So get him on the phone if you can. I really do need the update on this. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance also said this to Margaret Brennan, cut number 7.
Well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country
This is a
founded
unique
by.
country.
This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers. But just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world.
That's the perfect response. Now we have Dr. Oren on the phone. Dr. Oren, third. We'll land this plane the third time. What's the status of the hostage deal?
What is the? I still can't hear you. What is the hostage? I heard hostage deal.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the status. I gather there are 26.
It looks like it's going off. Listen, they just informed us that 8 of the 33 they're scheduled to give back are dead, and we don't know which ones are dead, but we fear the ones that are dead include the children, the Bibas family, and others. And we've had this incredible roller coaster, this emotional roller coaster of joy in repatriating these people who have been in prison for a year and a half and unspeakable tortures. And in spite of the fact that they quote unquote fattened up these hostages before they let them out and cleaned them up and gave them fresh army uniforms, we know what they went through. It's coming out now. It was months and months and months of being alone in tunnels, freezing, starving, being beaten, and probably worse.
No.
And we're not going to have the same joy if when the ambulance doors opens, it's not a person who gets out but a box. And that's going to be very different. And meanwhile, the torture of the parades, the emotional terrorism that they put us through and what it's doing to Israeli society, it's going to take us a long time to heal. And my gut feeling tells me, Hugh, that they're, at the end of the day, a generation of Israelis are going to say to themselves, this fight is not over yet.
Let's talk about what Envoy Witkoff said yesterday. He expects flare-ups, but thinks it will hold. What do you think he means by a flare-up? Is it like the double cross that Hamas did this week, throwing different names in and Islamic Jihad, say, "Oh, we've got them. We'll let them go on Thursday." It's like they think they have an open, ambiguous deal. It's not. It's in paper. It's in black and white.
That's if you're dealing with an actual country, a responsible party. You're dealing with a terrorist organization. A couple of football metaphors, okay? As we enter, the end of the football season, it's moving the goalposts. It's loosey with the football.
Yeah,
they're always going to move it, and I guarantee. I'm not a prophet. I guarantee you that tomorrow there could be a rocket or two in Sderot along the border, or an ambush along Israeli soldiers, and they're going to say, "Well, it's not us. It's somebody else doing this." And my fear is that somebody in Washington will say, "Well, listen, it's just a rocket or two. You're not going to blow up a whole agreement just for a rocket or two." And then they're going to come at the end and say, "Listen, we don't really have all these hostages. It's not us. Somebody else got them."
I liked when the prime minister or whomever decided this, might have been the security cabinet, might have been the whole cabinet, said, "You did not deliver the names that you were supposed to deliver, the hostages who were supposed to turn over. The Gazans who are going to go north may not go north." That got some results in a hurry. So it tells me Israel will abide by the letter of this agreement, but they're not going to let Hamas or Islamic Jihad or whoever, terrorist flavor of the day, flex. You agree with that assessment?
I hope so. I hope it's the broken window philosophy. That if you let the little crack, there's going to be big cracks. And the big cracks are going to create a situation where the residents of the north are simply not going to go back to their homes. You wouldn't go back to a neighborhood where maybe there's a rocket falling every month or so, right? You wouldn't let your kids be there. And that's a big difference. And so we have to have a zero tolerance policy for violations of this ceasefire. And I was happy that we did that we delayed the return of apparently hundreds of thousands of Gazans to the north because Hamas didn't live up to the letter of their agreement. And we see now they're still in violation of the agreement. They haven't released the agreement was that they release the women civilian hostages first and then the military women hostages. Well, they haven't. And we're going to see whether they do that this weekend or not.
Now I want to turn to the north and the Lebanon situation, which I'm trying to keep discrete from the Gaza situation, but with a quick aside to Syria. Do you have any hope that that Syrian new regime may be like the UAE or the Saudis or anyone like that, or are they bad actors from the Hamas central casting type?
And my response is actually neither that nor neither the first nor the second, and it's this. Syria is a country that was created by the Europeans to serve European interests. Okay, it doesn't have natural borders. It contains all different ethnicities, different religious groups that don't really have much in common. And what happens if you don't have a central power which is brutal, cruel, and saying to people in Syria, you are Syrian or you're going to die, Syria unravels.
You were going to explain to us in 6 minutes what's going on in Syria, which you said off-air is about to split up into parts, and in Lebanon, where there is a ceasefire but not a ceasefire. I really am confused. Let's stay with Syria first. It's going to split up?
My guess is it's going to split up. If the heads of this organization, Tahrir, are willing to play the role of central brutal power, basically filling the void left by the fall of the Assad regime, being nice to different parts of Syria is not going to work. You're already going to see parts of Syria, the Alawite part, which is along the coast, the Druze part, which is in the mountains, the Christian part, is going to say, listen, we want our own country. We don't want to be part of this Syria. What do we have to do here? And Syria as a country has done nothing in the Middle East but threaten its neighbors. Nothing but in the Middle East but threaten all of its neighbors. So the departure of Syria, this European creation, wouldn't be a tragedy for the peoples of the Middle East.
Has the pipeline from Tehran ended effectively? That's the most important thing from my perspective.
Yeah, they're going to keep on trying to subvert and get in there, and they do have populations like the Alawites. The Alawites are a breakaway branch of Shiism that have been very close to the Iranian regime, and I think that would be. I remember I'm not in an official capacity, but I think it would be Israel's interest not to have a united Syria that would continue to threaten its neighbors.
All right,
now Syria that made peace with us would be great, but I don't know if that's in the cards. As for Lebanon, a word about Lebanon?
Yes.
The other day there was an assassination of a Hamas official, and I've been predicting this for a long time. Groups in Lebanon, the Druze, the Christians, the Sunni Muslims, they hate Hezbollah. And they've got a long list of grievances. And I said to friends of mine in Israel saying, just watch. As soon as Hezbollah is weakened, and it has been weakened as a result of our war, it's cut off from resupply by Iran, you're going to watch one after another, Hezbollah leaders are going to get knocked off. And it started.
Now, the story on the weekend that I saw was that not the brightest people in the world decided they would ignore the direction of the IDF and go back to where they wanted to go in southern Lebanon, even though Hezbollah has not taken down their fortifications and the Lebanese army has not shown up. And there was firing on crowds and people died. What was that story?
It wasn't that they were stupid. It was that they were working for Hezbollah. And a lot of them were flying Hezbollah flags. And Hezbollah sent them into southern Lebanon to test this and to get killed. That's what Hezbollah wants Israel to kill civilians. That makes Israel look bad. They don't care about civilians any more than Hamas cares about Palestinians. And so they tested us. They tested our mettle. They tested our resolve, and they found it. And it got a bad headline in the New York Times, which is precisely what Hezbollah wanted.
All right. Last question. I think Netanyahu has run a very good war. And I know that 10-7 usually means in Israel that you have to exit. But Golda Meir survived the 1973 war. She won the next election. Is Netanyahu come back?
He can. For the record, Golda Meir survived another 6 months after the 1973 war.
Oh, didn't she win an election?
Yeah, she won an election, but she was forced to resign. And so Bibi may not want to use that example.
Okay.
But right now it doesn't look good for him. I always say it's premature to eulogize him politically, because on one hand he's saddled with the responsibility for October 7th, though he doesn't like to talk about that. He likes to put the responsibility on the army. On the other hand, now this hostage release and the images of Hamas terrorists parading in the street of Gaza, and people saying, listen, right now, as of this point, though militarily we may have won the war, politically, strategically, we lost the war in Gaza. And it's not done yet. And so, he can't claim, he can't sort of run away from responsibility from the first or claim the victory in the second. Remember, he was the one who came out and said the goal is total victory, total victory, total victory. Now he's got to explain to the Israeli people why there's no total victory. He gave a congratulatory video to President Trump, and he said the goal of the war now is to ensure that Hamas can no longer govern Gaza and can no longer threaten the state of Israel. That is very different from total victory over Hamas. So
Dr. Oren, this is almost schizophrenic to me. We have massive demonstrations in Israel demanding the hostages come home. Hostages are coming home, as many as is possible, until Hamas or the Islamic Jihad break the deal. Netanyahu has waged successful war against Lebanon and Hamas. Can he win? Is there any way he can actually win the political battle? And this is not anything to do with the hostages. It's just they're irreconcilable.
Clearly. You read the Free Press. I wrote an article in the Free Press about that, how it was irreconcilable. But on one hand, he gets response. People are angry at him about October 7th. People are angry about him that he didn't reach the hostage deal earlier. Some of the hostage people came out and said, "We're gonna get Netanyahu for taking so long," and hostages died. The other part of Israel is angry at him for making the deal at all, and calling him for buckling to American pressure. So he's got anger all over the place. The only good thing going for him is that there's no heir apparent. The Israelis look at the other people in the political spectrum and they say, "This guy can't run a country. He can't run a war. He can't represent us in the world. Only Bibi could do that." So what you get is a strange poll, Hugh, that says people want Bibi to go, overwhelmingly want him to go, but overwhelmingly they think he's the most qualified person to be prime minister. So go figure.
I can't. If he got hit by an anvil falling out of an office building or by a court decision, who steps up?
It does. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Netanyahu used to always say to me, if I walked across the Sea of Galilee, the headline the next day in the Israeli press would be, "Bibi can't swim."
That's the LBJ quote originally about Potomac. And I think I love that with regards to him because I really do not know. He's not driven by politics. I don't think he's driven by politics, but by legacy now. Am I right?
That's my gut feeling. Yes.
All right. Dr. Michael Oren, thank you for joining us. Dr. Michael Oren on X. Dr. Michael Oren on X. Thank you, Doctor. I love talking to him because there's so many balls in the air that it's really impossible to figure out what's going on. It really is impossible to figure out what's going on. But luckily, we have J.D. Vance on immigration speaking. I just can't get enough of this Margaret Brennan thing. We have a short clip here, cut number 8, again with Margaret Brennan, the vice president.
FEMA has specialized expertise that some of these states just don't have.
Margaret,
in their arsenal. And
I wish
how
that they...
will states who are lower income states, the Mississippis, the Kentuckys, the Alabamas, be able to do this for themselves without federal help?
Well, the president, to be clear, is not saying we're going to leave anybody behind. He's saying that in the way that we administer these resources, some of which is coming from the federal level, some of which is coming from the state level, we've got to get the bureaucrats out of the way and get the aid to the people who need it most.
But these
I've got to tell you, the condescension in that question, the vice president let that pass. I don't think he'll do that a second time. Breaking news, America. From Bill Malugian over at Fox. I quote from his X account. Per multiple law enforcement sources, within the last hour, Border Patrol agents from Fronton, Texas, were fired upon from Mexico by suspected cartel gunmen as a group of illegal aliens were being brought across the river. I'm told the Border Patrol returned fire, nobody hit on either side, and that the illegal aliens did not make it across. The Marines were down there. The messaging is perfect. I hope no innocent person who paid money to the cartel gets caught in a crossfire. But I think drones are going to be up. I think the cartels are in for a world of hurt. Much like you might be in if you're overweight and you want to stay overweight. One of our great sponsors, Dwayne's not overweight. You don't have to put up his picture yet, Harley. He's the spokesperson for My PhD Weight Loss, not for the people who need to get on it. MyPhDweightloss.com, great sponsor of the show. Dwayne lost 50 pounds 2.5 years ago. He's kept it off. 864
644
1900. That's
864
644
1900.
You know, golfing is not exercise.
Okay.
You were out on the golf courses.
I was
Early.
very early. First off.
And first off,
First.
on the day after a rain?
Yeah.
That's not a good. Did you have carts?
Yes.
You're not allowed to do cart golf on the did you have to leave the cart on the path?
Only 2 and 5 did we have to stay on the path. The rest of the time they said it's wide open. You
But
can do
none
what
of
you
your
want.
balls go in the fairway anyway, right?
I actually hit okay today. I had to bail out early to come here. I got 14 out of the 18 in, and I was sitting on.
And so you got about 100 on 14, right?
I was sitting on 70 when I left.
Oh, sitting on 70 with 4 to go.
Yes.
4 par 5s.
2 4s, a 3, and a 5.
Yeah, that would have been another 30 stroke. Okay, 100. That's not bad.
I was working on about a 90 game, which is about what I can do.
MyPhDweightloss.com. Has your golf game gotten better since you lost the weight?
It actually has. I've got more stamina. I can get around even on a cart. You're still walking all over the place.
No, you're not. Cart golf is not exercise.
Okay, whatever you say.
It's not. It's
Okay.
like e-bikes are not bicycles.
They actually are bicycles.
864
644.
1900 if you want to join MyPhDweightloss.com. I want to go back to J.D. Vance making a poster child for how not to do media with Margaret Brennan. Cut number 6.
The Wall Street Journal and the National Review, conservative publications, as you know, have been critical of Tulsi Gabbard. The Review called her an atrocious nominee who deserves to be defeated. They compared her defense of Edward Snowden, the fugitive who stole U.S. secrets, to an attorney general who thinks the mob gets a bad rap. Her refusal to accept U.S. intelligence findings that Assad gassed his own people, they said, was like a nominee for OMB director not being able to count. Does any of this give you pause, putting her in charge of the U.S. intelligence community? Yes or no?
No, Margaret, look, these are publications that attacked Donald J. Trump obsessively.
Perfect pitch. J.D. Vance, welcome to the first day of the second week of the golden age of America. Olivia Beavers is with the Wall Street Journal. She's in Florida where the House Republicans are gathering. Hello, Olivia. How are you?
Hi, Hugh. I'm good. I'm actually squeezing this interview in right between 2 different press conferences. The first, House GOP leaders just addressed us in the press room and took a few questions and talked about a series of different things, including Colombia, including President Trump's firing of the inspectors general. And then Donald Trump, the president, is expected to speak in about an hour if he stays on time, and that is expected to be broadcasted. So we're off to a fun start.
Well, tell me you didn't ask the question about the inspectors generals. Did you, Olivia?
I did not, but I was
thank
curious
goodness.
to know the answer. And you are getting some reactions from different Republicans, like Senator Grassley, who say that they want more answers from the administration on that. My question was about the different tariffs and whether there was concerns about the cost of goods going up and what that might be explained.
That's legit. I mean, tariff wars are going to happen, but whoever's dogging the IG thing, I know Chuck Grassley cares about IGs. He's the only person in Washington, D.C. who cares about IGs. I mean, if I could guess, I'm guessing, tell me if I'm wrong, it's a legacy media outlet and they want to stir up controversy. And that it's just such not a story, whether or not they broke the law by 30 days without giving notice to the IG. The IGs were a good idea whose time long since passed. What was the answer on that, Olivia?
I think the answer was Speaker Johnson said that Trump wants a fresh start and they're going to be putting in new inspectors general, and they will be able to take the reins and do it in this sort of clean slate approach, is how Johnson answered the question.
Now, the key bit of news for me is, did you get a one big beautiful bill or two bills answer from the speaker?
The speaker only said that the timeline is going according to plan, and they want to pass something out of the House at the end of February. Let's see if that happens. But tomorrow is actually, I think, 10 o'clock tomorrow Republicans are gathering, and they're supposed to be finalizing some sort of details about the reconciliation plan and figuring out what basically gets put into this major package to help fund the president's top priorities. And so I think they're debating what goes into the reconciliation bill and what goes into the separate government funding bill, including California aid and different things like that.
Now, at the speech to Davos, President Trump said we need to hit 5% GDP in every NATO country. That would be $1.45 trillion this year in the defense budget. Do you think that they're going to go from 880 million to 1.45 trillion in 1 year?
I don't have that kind of crystal ball, and I actually feel like you might be better at answering that question than I would.
Well, I don't know how you can actually pass. The reconciliation can pick a deficit number, any number they want. Last time the Republicans did that, they said, okay, we're going to spend $1.5 trillion we haven't got in order to do the tax cuts that Trump put forward. This time around, I don't know if they're trying to make it balance or if they're going to project trillions in spending deficit. Do you know?
That's, I think, part of the internal debate. You have a wing of the party saying that there should be offsets to completely mirror what the cost of this bill is going to be. And then there's some who say that isn't a reasonable expectation to have it perfectly offset, because I think it's going to be over 10 years, 10 trillion. It was, I think, the number that I read recently. So you're seeing that discussion going across the board, and you definitely are having some of the more kind of conservative corners of the conference in the House and the Senate saying that they want offsets. But I don't really know where they've landed on that in terms of, they definitely have some ideas, and they were presented last week about where they can pull back money. But those are just sort of discussion items, and I don't know if those have been actually formalized into a final plan.
There are spending cuts to be made, but there are also revenue enhancements to be had. And by that, I don't mean raising taxes. I mean, well, I do mean raising taxes on every gambling wager made in the United States, for example, would be much approved by me because it's a bad thing and it's going to capture a lot of people in addiction. But will Republicans breathe? Go ahead.
Well, like, I guess, do you mean like sanctions, which helps bring the government in some money? Like,
no, just a tax. If someone wants to bet on the Cavaliers and they say they'll go for the over-under against the next game of 180 points, whatever that is, and someone makes a wager that 5% of that wager goes to the federal government. The VIG goes to the government. And right now, nothing is being taxed in gambling, and it's ridiculous.
I don't know if that's what they're going to go for. I haven't heard that as part of like the congressional discussions. Maybe I'm completely out of the loop on that one part, but I don't imagine that members who are away from any of the kind of casino heavy states would possibly oppose.
Now, the interesting thing, Olivia, does anyone in your life bet?
My family is not a betting family. I like to bet in terms of favors, but not money.
I do not wager online. I think it's stupid. It's a tax on stupidity in my view. But it's an enormous industry, and it's growing like the internet grew, free of federal. You got to have a state that allows you to do it, but the states don't tax it either. I just can't imagine letting a vice tax go by.
Well, that's a good question, because I'll be doing some interviews tomorrow, and I'll see if there's an appetite for some of the people who are crafting that.
Now, I'll also bring up, I don't know what the law in Virginia is on marijuana. In California, you can get it at any corner for, it's legal. It's legal in Colorado. It's legal in a lot of states. But the states tax it so heavily that they've created a black market, actually, because people want to buy their dope cheaper. Any idea of preempting the states and putting a federal tax on marijuana sales?
No, I do not. But I think that they just have started to open. I know in my hometown in Charlottesville, there have been some sort of weed shops to start to open. So I think that it has been not fully legalized. There's some rules about it.
I haven't seen
but
a dope store in Northern Virginia yet, but that I'm not looking for them either, so I don't know whether or not it exists. But if it exists, we should tax it. It's like liquor. You know, you're too young. Sin taxes used to be rather routine. Tax liquor, tax cigarettes. But we're not taxing gambling and dope, and it just seems to me to be crazy. There are federal excise taxes on gas, taxes on cigarettes, taxes on liquor. I think the Republicans are nuts not to go after these essentially downstream costs. They have negative externalities in the worlds of economists. Do they have an economist talking to them, Olivia? Is there someone who's driving that boat?
Oh, I think that there was even last conference, the Republican policy chair, he was then Gary Palmer, he was talking to an economist about different things. I don't know if he's still with it because there's now Kevin Hearn in that position. But I know that they've been pulling in different experts to decide how to move forward. And I'm sure that they are also, definitely communicating back and forth with the White House, which has their own string of experts as well.
So last question, Olivia. The president is going to talk to him. Is his press conference going to air before or after that meeting?
I believe that they are going to air it and then they're going to huddle privately. But we're going to be trying to get details about what they say after the cameras stop rolling.
All right. I will be looking in the Wall Street Journal tomorrow, Olivia Beavers. Thank you so much. That's the byline you should look for. Olivia actually knows what she's doing. She actually does the work, and she's fair at the Wall Street Journal. Follow her on Twitter at Olivia_Beavers. Senator Tom Cotton is not only conference chair of the Republicans in the Senate, he's also the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And I believe that one or the other, certainly the former, are going to mark up an ICC, International Criminal Courts bill this week. Am I right about that, Senator?
Good afternoon, Hugh. It's good to be on with you. Not quite. We actually have a bill from the House of Representatives that passed overwhelmingly both last summer and earlier this month with more than 40 Democrats that would impose sanctions on every ICC official, prosecutor, judge, lawyer, investigator, researcher who in any way is engaged in illegitimate matters for the court. First and foremost, targeting American troops. They've done it before. They've continued to do it in the past. We've been very clear how serious we are. We sent Imran Khan, the prosecutor there, a letter saying if he proceeded against another non-party, Israel, that he would pay the price. That's the price they're about to pay. It is time for this illegitimate court to learn its lesson. If you investigate America or you investigate our friends who don't belong to the treaty establishing the court, we're going to lower the boom on you.
What kind of sanctions are there, Senator, that are being proposed?
It is the ordinary, routine, and customary sanctions that block property transactions on property that is present in the United States and that deny visas to the officials and to their immediate family members. The kinds of ordinary, routine, customary sanctions that Obama and Biden imposed on people almost 50 times during their tenures in office. And again, it doesn't target the entire court. I might have preferred to do that, but my friend Chip Roy in the House negotiated on a bipartisan basis last summer to target only those officials at the court that are responsible directly for suits or investigations against Americans or friends in other countries who are not a party to the court. So the Democrats really don't have any serious argument here to oppose it. That's why over 40 Democrats supported the bill earlier this month. And I hope my Democratic colleagues in the Senate will come along with me and stand up for our fellow citizens, and especially for American troops who have been targeted by this court in the past. And let's just be frank, if the court gets away with targeting Benjamin Netanyahu, I think it's a trial run for targeting Donald Trump now or in the future.
Now, which committee is the authorizing committee for this, Senator? Who gets the first whack at an ICC?
It would typically come out of the Foreign Relations Committee, Hugh. However, the Foreign Relations Committee last year, under Ben Cardin, and ultimately under the direction of Chuck Schumer, refused to take action on this bill, even though it passed last summer from the House, again, with more than 40 Democrats, because Chuck Schumer didn't want to put his senators in a hard spot to offend the anti-Semitic wing of their party, which is sadly large and growing. So he put this bill on ice. He never engaged in negotiations, certainly not in good faith negotiations. But now that we're in charge, we're calling up this important bill that is absolutely critical to protect our fellow citizens from this illegal, illegitimate kangaroo courts investigations.
Good for you. I hope that gets through in lickety-split fashion. Talk to me a little bit, if you can, Senator, about nominations. Secretary Hegseth was confirmed. We played part of your speech about prepared to work around the clock, and I think you are working around the clock. When do you see all the cabinet members being done?
Well, Hugh, the Democrats cried uncle Friday night after Pete's confirmation, which I was pleased to see, by the way. Without getting too far in the weeds, I would say that if we had actually worked around the clock under the Senate rules by tonight at about 6 o'clock, we would have had confirmed Pete Hegseth, Kristi Noem, and Scott Bessent, and that's all.
Wow.
Because we ground down the Democrats' will on Friday, we were able to allow our senators to go home for Sunday to see their families and go to church back home. But also tonight we'll be voting not only to confirm Scott Bessent to be Secretary of Treasury, to begin Sean Duffy's debate on the floor, which I expect will conclude tomorrow before lunch. So it is working. The Democrats are learning a little bit that we're prepared to do it the hard way, and they've wanted to do it not quite the easy way, but at least the less hard way.
The most important ones after defense and the CIA, in my view, is Attorney General Bondi, or Attorney General designate Bondi, and her deputy Todd Blanche. Where are those?
So, Hugh, I'm not on the Judiciary Committee anymore, but I do believe that I saw in my morning briefing papers that Judiciary will vote on Pam Bondi's nomination on Wednesday. So that would typically, again, under ordinary practices, set up a vote to confirm Pam Bondi, if not over the weekend, then early next week. I'm not sure about where Todd Blanche's nomination is. I do know that the Judiciary Committee is moving after the Wednesday vote to have its hearing on Thursday for Kash Patel to be the director of the FBI. I suspect that's a higher priority right now for the White House than Todd Blanche is, even though we really need to get Todd Blanche in. But I would expect that after they're done with the Kash Patel confirmation hearing, they'll be moving promptly to the Todd Blanche nomination.
Let's switch over to the DOD since you're on armed services. How about SecNav Phelan? I do believe it's urgent that we get a plan and we implement it, and you can't do that until you have a SecNav and some staff around him. What do you think?
I think the Armed Services Committee will move to Mr. Phelan's nomination as soon as the paperwork is in. We have a hearing later this week for Dan Driscoll to be the Secretary of the Army. That hearing had been originally scheduled last week. I think it had to be postponed because of the paperwork delay. I suspect that we're able to move a little bit quicker on Dan Driscoll's nomination than on John Phelan's, just to be frank, because Dan Driscoll is much younger and John Phelan is much richer.
Yep.
Sometimes it takes it takes a little bit of time to do the thorough background inspection, but for some of these older men who have been lavishly successful in business, to make sure their paperwork is in order and they've divested from any stocks or other assets that might be within the scope of their responsibility.
Long ago and far away, Senator, when you were in swaddling clothes or short pants, I used to do some of those divestment stuff, and it always hit people in the head when they found out that they had to divest in order to serve. Are those rules still as stringent as they used to be?
They're pretty strict, Hugh. I mean, obviously in the executive branch, you can't have an interest in anything that you would oversee or for which you'd be materially responsible, or if you do, you might have to recuse. Those recusals are common. They're not helpful in many cases. It's not good, for instance, to have a Secretary of Defense that has to recuse from major decisions because they used to work at one of these defense contractors. I think that's another thing that commended Pete Hegseth to President Trump, is he's an outsider and a disruptor, and he's going to be in charge of everything. It's been a common practice in recent years that we've had secretaries that have had to recuse from pretty significant decisions about major weapon programs, fighters, bombers, ships, submarines, what have you. But it is still pretty stringent that we don't want people engaged in decision-making in any place where they might have a financial or personal interest.
Last quick question. The Deputy Secretary of Defense is the inside person, the one who runs the big Pentagon while Pete Hegseth is out being a recruiting poster and making policy with the president. When does that nominee come before your committee?
Again, Hugh, I think as promptly as possible once we have the paperwork in. Mr. Feinberg, like Mr. Phelan, has had a long and very successful career in business, so I'm sure it takes some time to liquidate some of his investments, probably that are illiquid, that are not in publicly traded securities. But I think he'll move promptly. I will say, Hugh, one thing about the way you framed the question, and this is something I told Pete Hegseth repeatedly, is the secretary, although he is the public face of the department, he spends a lot of time with the president, he has to be out meeting the troops, is the only person with the authority and prestige to drive reform inside the building. And I think Pete knows that, and I expect him to be very hardworking inside the department to get the reform we need.
Senator Tom Cotton, thank you for your time from the great state of Arkansas. Tom Homan is the border czar, and he doesn't waste any time adding to the messaging. The Marines deployed. There was an exchange of gunfire at the border, but mostly it's Tom Homan out there telling people the way it is and the way it's going to be for at least 4 years. Cut number 12. This is Tom Homan with Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Week.
I want to go back to those military flights going south. As you said, we have never seen that before. Is that going to be a constant commitment from the U.S. military every single day to take deportees out?
Yes.
So is this what we will see every single day, ending in what the president has promised is millions and millions being deported?
Yes. But you're going to see the numbers steadily increase.
The estimates of perhaps those who have been convicted or arrested in the past, 700,000 to over 1 million. So after you do that, then you go after everybody who is there illegally.
If you're in the country illegally, you're on the table, because it's not okay to, violate laws of this country. You got to remember, every time you enter this country illegally, you violated a crime under Title 8, United States Code 1325. It's a crime. So if you're in the country illegally, you got a problem. And that's why I'm hoping those who are in the country illegally who have not been ordered removed by the federal judge should leave.
All right. Martha Raddatz looks stunned. Every day? Yes, every day. By the way, we're not going to run through the 1.2 million to 1.5 million who are convicted criminals anytime soon, but Martha wants a story. Legacy media is so broken. Phil McGraw, Dr. Phil, went with Tom Homan on Merit TV for a ride-along in Chicago, cut number 13.
What's your name?
Seda.
Seda what? You have a person last name?
Sam.
Seda Sam?
Yes.
Where are you from?
Where I was born or where I'm from?
Where are you born?
Thailand.
You've been deported before from the United States?
No.
Never been deported?
But I've been in the system before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you been charged with
Charged with?
before?
I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna talk to my lawyer.
Yeah. Are you a citizen?
My mom's a citizen.
Your mother's a citizen?
Yes.
But you're not?
Nope.
But you've never been deported before?
You Dr. Phil. You look like Dr. Phil.
Yeah? How do you know me?
No, I seen Dr. Phil, on TV.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this
Go
is
to
an
cut number
example of
14.
sanctuary
It
series,
goes
right?
on. Dr. Phil's got a scoop. Cut number 14.
Wonder where they go, who picks them up. This is who picks them up. This is who lures them out on the internet, and they disappear, or they get raped, and their lives change forever. And he shouldn't even be here, but he's doing this. But they don't raise their hand and say, hey, there's somebody that doesn't even have the right to be here that's preying upon our children, and they don't tell you about it.
Exactly. And this Governor Pritzker, and the mayor, they want to vilify the men and women of ICE. ICE saved children today. ICE saved children today. And it makes me angry. Governor Pritzker the other day went on the internet, social media, saying ICE was attacking our elementary school. He's scaring children. He's scaring the neighborhood, putting fear in the community. We're doing the exact opposite. We're saving children. Every sexual predator we arrest means more safe children. So God bless the men and women of ICE. As you've seen today, we're not sweeping neighborhoods. This is a target enforcement operation. We spend a lot of time investigating these people. We know exactly who we're looking for. So it's a target enforcement operation. It's the right thing to do.
Well, let's talk about how methodical this was, because you guys had this man, this monster on the list, and they've been sitting on this guy for 2 or 3 days to try to get where he was and his pattern, and you were actually able to ping his cell phone and get him on the move so he could be picked up on the street, rather than if he got to his dwelling, wherever that is, and got behind a closed door, then he could have sat there and you didn't have the right to go in and get him if he sits behind that door, right?
Not without a criminal arrest warrant, but that's exactly the point. He could have been arrested at a county jail, in the safety and security county jail by one officer.
Right.
But we spent hundreds of hours to investigate him, try to find out where he is, and we did find him. It takes a whole team for officer safety to arrest him. Right. It's not efficient. We could arrest many more criminals if you let us in the jail. It's just a lot harder to find these guys out in the public. These guys don't want to be found. They're in the wind. It takes a lot of investigative work to find them. Let us in the jail. Don't let them hit the street. It saves officers time. It's safer for the community. It's safer for the alien. It's safer for the officer.
Tom Homan's going to be man of the
hundreds
year.
of hours.
Everybody wants him to be their next door neighbor because this guy doesn't mess around, and he's law enforcement. And I think the messaging he is conducting is 5-star on the money. Vic Mattis is co-host of the Getting Hammered podcast, the weekend editor at the Washington Free Beacon, and doppelganger of Warren, whoever Warren is. I want Warren to sit in for you one time. Vic, would you tell people that story?
Yeah, this is crazy. So a couple of years ago, a pastor in my hometown church in Toms River, New Jersey, he said to me, he called out to a person he thought was me in the parking lot. And of course, it wasn't me. It was this other Asian dude. And I told Father Scott Schaefer, oh, I don't know about that. Do we really look the same? And he showed me a picture. And sure enough, it was frightening. He had, well, his hair is darker than mine, so I'm very jealous. But he had the same sort of glasses that I do. And, you know, probably slightly younger, but dashing good looks, needless to say. And then I just forgot about it. And the next thing you know, my sister, just 2 weeks ago, ran into the same guy and said, you look just like my brother. And her husband said the same thing. And then, of course, the pastor comes in and says, this is the guy I've been telling you about. So they all took pictures together because this guy Warren is like, who is this Vic Mattis? And
well, I want to talk to him now. You got to do a special edition of Getting Hammered with Mary Catherine's brother and Warren with you, like a foursome. I've got a doppelganger too. His name is Peter Kinder. He used to be the lieutenant governor of Missouri. And we laugh. We've never been in the room together. So we laugh about this, but doppelgangers are a real deal. So they happen. It's kind of fun. But that led to a discussion of twin hijinks, which I found very amusing only because when twin hijinks came up, you went immediately to the movie Dave. And as I was listening to Getting Hammered, I went to the movie The Parent Trap, which I believe Mary Catherine ended up bringing up finally.
Yeah, I think it was me. I think I brought up The Parent Trap too as well, Hugh, which of course is the Haley Mills, the original. The original. And then later on, that was Lindsay Lohan in the remake. But it's adorable twin hijinks. As long as you say hijinks, nobody's going to get in trouble.
Yeah, you know what's funny about that? The second one was on a continual loop in my house when my daughter was that age. So The Parent Trap remake was on, and we kept saying The Parent Trap, the original one's funnier and better, but we leave doppelgangers aside. I want to go to Vic the Iron Fist, because that's all velvet glove stuff. You guys are all velvet glove stuff when you start off. You know, you're, how you doing, Vic? I'm doing good, Mary Catherine. How are you? It's always very fun and uplifting and twin hijinks. Yeah. Then you brought the Iron Fist down on remote work among the federal employees.
Yeah, I have little patience for that. And I understand there's going to be challenges, right? There's going to be traffic challenges, especially as I pointed out in cities like Washington, D.C. and New York City. You got the bus lanes, you got the bike lanes. Some of these main thoroughfares, like on 6th Avenue in New York City, you're down to like 2 or 3 lanes in one direction. It's a nightmare. I don't know how many people are going to do this. And in Washington, D.C., and they talk about people are going to flee the federal government and go out west because it's more talent, people more flexible. But the fact is, there are a lot of people, the government has great benefits for you. And all they're asking is, can you come in so we know what work you're doing? It's the question of productivity. And from a managerial standpoint, I think we all think this, which is when we don't see them, what are they doing?
Well, Vic, I'm really a little bit alarmed of you as a boss because you're in favor of the German guy who went to the people who called in 6 houses to see if they were at home.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm just sympathetic. That's right, Hugh. I'm sympathetic to the guy at the Tesla factory who, whenever somebody called sick, he would pay a visit to their home just to kind of double check to make sure, and maybe bring some orange juice or something to make them chicken soup to make them feel better. But obviously, it's about taking attendance. I know it's not popular. I was only half serious, but I understand the concern because
Well, I didn't think you were
what are we
serious at
doing over
all.
here?
I do want to, though, bring up the fact that Washington's in for a shock. When I was a young man and working in the Beltway, we made a mistake of buying a house, our first non-attached house in Great Falls beyond the edge of the world without doing the commute. And, of course, that became a nightmare. Luckily, I got called to California and could sell the house and get out of there because that was an hour and 15 minutes each way. A lot of people have bought houses in the last 5 years during remote work. Wait until they see what the 395 is like after people come back to work.
That is going to be a challenge. You mentioned Great Falls. If only you held on to that house longer, you could have sold it for tens of millions of more. But for a lot of these people, it's true. And obviously in the private sector, we have got a lot of workers. They're located all throughout the country, and they do great stuff. But there is something missing about not having people in the office. And obviously, from the journalism point of view, it's very exciting when you have all the people around the newsroom and they're throwing out ideas, and you just have to walk out of your own office to ask a question, and you get a couple different answers trying to figure out what the right lead is or what the right framing of a particular story is. And it's the same thing for any other office. It just helps having people around. I understand that is going to be a problem. And for a lot of people, they're not going to be able to do it. And if there's flexibility, good for you. But I imagine for a lot of members of the federal government, there's going to be a lot of people who are eager to take some of these jobs. There are going to be openings, and it certainly makes it easier for the Trump administration to let people go who they probably do not want to keep in the first place.
Yeah, now it was a great edition of Getting Hammered, and I recommend everyone follow and like Getting Hammered because it is fun, and they get to important stuff and serious stuff. Now, Vic, I want to ask you, this has got nothing to do with Getting Hammered. Earlier today, I talked to Olivia Beavers, and Olivia has been doing my show for a few years, and she left Politico and went to the Wall Street Journal. And I'm glad because I don't like Politico and I love the Wall Street Journal. So I'm glad Olivia is a real reporter and went over to the Journal. I'm thinking, Andrew Saberi, you got a bunch of great talent at the Free Beacon.
We do.
How do you get them to stay when all these different outlets want the good one? You're like you're growing kids into real reporters.
Well, let's see. The first thing is we're probably very generous about their ability to work remote. No, I'm just kidding about that. No, some of our workers do, and again, they do find work. And again, at the end of the day, it's about the product and productivity. In Aaron Saberium's work, again, as you mentioned, does amazing work. He comes into the office all the time, and he does his work. It's a happy place to work. And we talk about the work-life balance. We talk about working for people who you enjoy being with. And I'm talking about our editor-in-chief, Eliana Johnson, and all of our colleagues, Colin Anderson. It's a happy place, and you will be generally compensated for good work.
There you go. You just got to match the competition. Vic Mattis, co-host of Getting Hammered. Thank you, Vic. Would you write down, please, educationfreedomusa.com. educationfreedomusa.com. This is a new initiative by our sponsor, the Job Creators Network. And they've been a sponsor forever, and they focus on different issues at different times. But Alfredo Ortiz and the Merry Band at Job Creators Network have really said this is the year of education freedom. Now, it's been burgeoning in places like Florida and West Virginia, places like Ohio and Iowa. It's come to many states desperately in need of education freedom. It's real and it's growing, and teachers' unions are doing the best that they can to stop it. And where teacher unions are powerful, like California, I don't know that we'll see education freedom for a long time, which is unfortunate because school choice is freedom. And it doesn't mean you'll leave your public school. It just means your public school a better performer. You're going to take that voucher and you're going to put it in your backpack and go down the street. Ohio had the backpack bill a year ago, thanks to Aaron Baer and his friends at the Center for Christian Virtue in Columbus and a bunch of other activists who worked around the clock to get that through. Well, I'm very, very glad that Job Creators Network has decided to make educationfreedomusa.com their project right now. So I want you to become a part of that because it should be universal. There is no doubt in my mind that it is the next civil rights movement. I'm going to talk about the second civil rights movement with Juan Williams next hour when we talk about his brand new book about the second civil rights movement. And Juan's an old friend, so I'm looking forward to talking to him. But I do want you to focus on right now, here and now. It was the first civil rights movement's effort to get black kids into white schools, to get them into school. That was what Little Rock was about, 1957? Now, public education unions want to keep black kids trapped in schools that are failing. So it's 180 degrees from what the traditional civil rights was all about. So go to educationfreedomusa.com and become part of the movement for universal school choice. Now, I found something last night. People know what I like, and the algorithm knows what I like. So it popped up on the phone, and I want to play for you. This is George H.W. Bush. It's only a minute. I don't have enough. Let's do Pete Hegseth instead. Cut number 20.
And as the Secretary of Defense, it's an honor to salute smartly, as I did as a junior officer and now as the Secretary of Defense, to ensure these orders are complied with rapidly and quickly. Every moment that I'm here, I'm thinking about the guys and gals in Guam, in Germany, in Fort Benning and Fort Bragg, on missile defense sites and aircraft carriers. Our job is lethality and readiness and warfighting. We're going to hold people accountable. I know the chairman agrees with that. The lawful orders of the President of the United States will be executed inside this Defense Department swiftly and without excuse. We will be no better friend to our allies and no stronger adversary to those who want to test us and try us.
Thank you, Secretary Hegseth. Pleased to welcome back Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy. He is from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, where he is a senior director. He's also running something called CSC 2.0, keeping alive the cyber solarium. Admiral, welcome back. I hope you're having a good Monday, are you?
I am, sir. Thanks for having me.
So, Admiral, let's begin with the Houthis. They're back on the terror list. What does that matter?
It matters, first of all, because they should have never been off of it. Within a month of coming in office, the Biden administration took them off of it. The Houthis are a terrorist organization that has terrorized the people of Yemen and their neighbors for decades. But very specifically, over the last 18 months, they've been attempting to cut off seaborne transit through the Red Sea by firing hundreds of ballistic and cruise missiles and drones into merchant shipping. The United States Navy, with a handful of allies, but really the United States Navy, has been aggressively engaged over the last 16, 17 months in shooting down these missiles and an extraordinary but expensive undertaking.
You know, Admiral, I was told by an active duty naval officer that the Eisenhower, a ship on which this officer did not serve, was awarded the first combat ribbon for a Navy ship in forever, because the Ford might follow and the Lincoln might follow, and I think the Truman's there now, but the Eisenhower got it. So it's real, actual combat. I don't know that Americans understand that.
No, you're exactly right. The Combat Action Ribbon is being awarded to the Carrier Strike Group, so it's the destroyers and other ships, oilers, and the aircraft carrier involved in this, and the air wing on board the carrier. And look, this is serious. We have had hundreds of missiles fired in the vicinity, most of them in the vicinity of our Navy ships. We engage those, and we engage the ones we believe are headed towards a merchant ship or an allied naval ship. And we've shot down ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones. Some of them, though, have actually been engaged in the very last moments of flight by our close-in weapon system because of, either challenges we had or identification problems we had. So there have been some close calls here. And the Navy's learned a lot from this. They've probably expended nearly $1 billion worth of ammunition in the Red Sea and in the Eastern, you got to add the Eastern Mediterranean in there, and the defense of Israel against Iranian attacks. But together, those amount to nearly $1 billion worth of weapon systems.
So what do we do about the Houthis? They made an announcement, and it might be part of the Ayatollah Khamenei, supreme leader of Iran, saying, hey, proxies, let's not take on the United States when Trump's president. Or it might be that they run out of missiles. I don't know, but what do we do about them?
Well, first, I'll tell you what we should have done over the last 15 months. We practiced something called deterrence by denial for the last 15 months, which is we shot down things headed to us, and we did very limited strikes against Houthi missile facilities, command and control facilities, stowage facilities. We should have, if you want to practice deterrence against the actual adversary, which in this case is Iran, because Iran will certainly fight the United States to the last Houthi. We needed to actually strike Iran. We needed to strike their port facilities where weapon systems were shipped to the Houthis. We needed to either seize or sink the spy ship, and we needed to strike their weapons production facilities. We did not practice deterrence properly. I think the threat of President Trump right now is a deterrent, and that's why you see these actions. But the Iranians are a crafty group. So I'll be very surprised if if the Red Sea weapons engagement zone stays cold for very long.
All right, when it gets hot again, what do we do?
Strike Iran.
All right.
Don't mess around.
That's what I thought. I'm glad to hear it from you. I'm a civilian, but you know what you're talking about, so I'm with you on that. Second question, Russia, Ukraine. What do you expect out of General Kellogg in the effort to bring some kind of a ceasefire operation into effect in the Russo-Ukraine war?
So I do like these initial steps. I am one of those retired officers who's in favor of supporting Ukraine, and personally, I've gone there and trained their senior officers on certain things in a pro bono basis. But I will say, I like how President Trump and particularly General Kellogg have stepped into this, which is to castigate Putin, to call him out, for a failed policy and, by Putin in Ukraine. I think the next step is some pressure. I've read The Art of the Deal. Art of the Deal has some great lines in it about, negotiate from a position of strength. I think the president has all the tools to do that. The first and the best ones are tools he loves. Drill, baby, drill. Pressure on the Russian shadow fleet, that group of ships that are going around and delivering fuel to China and India. In other words, sanction the facilities and the companies that receive that oil, not just the ones transporting it. And then, of course, work with our friends, the Saudis, to control global oil and natural gas prices, to put pressure on Russia. Russia's extraction prices in Siberia and the permafrost are higher than Saudis, and the Saudis can help us put a lot of pressure on the Russians.
Admiral, we got a lot of Steelers fans listening, so we're gonna have to break that down slowly for them. Why does drill, baby, drill and Saudi Arabia have anything to do with the Russia-Ukraine war? I get it, but we do have to take care of the Steelers fans.
My old boss, Senator McCain, used to, avert something along the lines of, Russia is a nation state masquerading as a gas station, or a gas station masquerading as a nation state. Either way, what he meant was a disproportionate amount of the money that drives the Russian economy comes from their sale of oil and natural gas, of fossil fuels. And therefore, if you can lower that price so that it gets down towards the extraction or the cost of withdrawing that oil and natural gas from the ground, shipping it, processing it, and getting out, in their shadow fleet, then Putin doesn't get any benefit from that. And he doesn't have a lot left in the tank. There's not that many oligarchs left to push off the 17th floor and grab their resources, right? So he doesn't have that. If he doesn't have the oil and natural gas, his current government spending is 45 to 50% on defense. So If you take away government money coming in, it will immediately impact. He'll have two choices: either stop all services to his population, which isn't good for an authoritarian regime, in terms of they usually buy the support of their people, or stop defense spending. Either both of those cause him to come to the negotiating table chastened.
Admiral, I've seen the casualty figures. They're staggering. I don't know what to believe. What do you think are Russian casualties?
So we have to be careful here. There's casualty. Sometimes we talk about casualties like 55,000 Americans in Vietnam. That was killed in action. So their killed in action, I think, is in the hundreds of thousands, 200 to 300,000, maybe closer to 200, but still a pretty big number. But their significant injured adds up. That's where you get the British Army's reporting of 600 to 700,000. And I'll just tell you, having lived in the Soviet Union previously during the Afghan war, I don't think they've changed how they run veterans affairs, how they run the treatment of their military when they come back wounded. So if you're one of those 300 or 400,000 that was severely wounded, it's going to be a challenging time for you and your family. So there's 700,000 families grieving, either due to the loss or the significant wounding of a service member in Russia.
Admiral, how long can Russia do that? And how long can Ukraine take whatever is the reciprocal number of casualties, both KIA and wounded?
So Ukraine's casualties are significantly lower by a factor of 3 or 4, I think. Wow. However, their population is smaller by a factor of 10, not 10, 7, So this is tough. This is tough math. You have two economies and populations and, the societal resiliences barreling along towards failure. And the question is, which one fails first? I think both of them have, late 2025, early 2026 is problematic times. Now, the Ukrainians can solve theirs a little bit by drafting. He's been holding off on drafting the real youth, the 18 to 25-year-olds. I think President Trump is going to, as part of his pressure campaign on Putin, tell Zelensky he's got to draft the youth as well, the 18 to 25-year-olds.
A quick exit question, Admiral. President threw out 5% GDP for NATO. That would include us. How many years would it take us, even if we were serious, to get to 5% GDP?
So we're at 3% right now. I've discussed this before. We fall and rise usually at about 0.1% a year. So I think absent a very demanding, some unusual incident, it's going to take us about a decade to get to 4%, about a decade to get to 5%, another decade after that. Now, obviously, you can change that dynamic and you can get back to 5%. Our traditional Cold War spending in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s.
Well, I hope we get there. I hope we get there faster rather than slower. Admiral Mark Montgomery from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you, Admiral. Talk to you again soon. Bethany Mandel is my guest. You can find her on X at Bethany Shondark. Bethany, what podcasts are you doing now?
I know. So I am co-founding a Substack and podcast called Mom Wars with Cara Kennedy Claremont. We're launching it in like a week or two.
Mom Wars. I like that.
Yeah, it's not on Apple yet, but it's just basically about all of the craziness in our mom culture, and we need a pro-natalist, sane voice out there, and it's going to be us. So.
What did you like about the vice president, or not like about the vice president going to March for Life and saying, "I want more babies"?
I loved it. So I actually wrote a column for the New York Post. It will be up probably in like an hour. I loved it. I loved that it wasn't just about abortion, but it was about embracing the vital importance of embracing life. He is the American dream in every way. And for him to stand there at the inauguration, his wife looking at him holding a 2-year-old who has Band-Aids on every finger, it was such a perfect vision that I hope that every young person in America saw and thought, I want to be like J.D. Vance, not just because I want to be professionally successful, but because what he really views as his ultimate success is that family. And I love that he is so open with it. His kids were at all the inauguration events. They were all over the campaign trail with him. And I think he's just such a wonderful ambassador for pro-life values, not just on abortion, but like living.
Now, let's pause for a moment on the Band-Aid question, because my daughter is fully stocked with every kind of Band-Aid you could possibly need. And Mary Catherine Ham talked about it on Getting Hammered. What is the Band-Aid of choice in your home?
So I'm a cheapo, and my kids don't even know that there's different like characters and stuff you can have. I just buy them at Costco, and then every like 3 months, and that way you don't have to worry. For a while I was really stingy about it, and then I did the math and I thought to myself, 10 cents to shut my kid up is worth it, and I just need to spend it. And so I can absolutely see Usha Vance saying, you know what, It's an early day. It's very stressful. You can put a Band-Aid on every finger. It can be Paw Patrol on one finger and I don't even Blues Clues on the other. Whatever it needs to happen to get us out the door so your dad can become vice president, let's just make this work.
I
So I could
agree.
just
I
see that
agree.
moment. I could see that moment in the vice president's residence.
Let's go from happy to very, very serious. 4 women were released by the terrorists on Saturday. 2 more are supposed to be released by the terrorists on Thursday. But, as Dr. Orrin told us earlier, the strain in Israel is growing because of the torture these women have been put through. And they're not even explicitly talking about the torture, just the inhumanity of it. What's your sense of the situation?
So there will be 3 released on Thursday and 3 more released on Saturday. I was thinking, right when this release happened, we got 4 IDF observers released, and the schedule of releases was actually supposed to be civilian women first, and there's still 1 civilian woman left, Arbel Yehud, and Israel went really hard to bat to make sure that she was released early. And thank God that President Trump is President Trump, because I don't think that Israel would have won that negotiation battle had they not had in their back pocket, there will be consequences from the American president if you do not abide by the ceasefire arrangement that we made. We are hearing reports of what those 4 young women went through. And one of the most chilling was one of the young women, Nama Levy. She was kept in the dark in a very tight tunnel for weeks, if not months. She lost track of time. And when she rejoined the other 3 girls, the other 4 girls actually, because there's one that's still in captivity alone. And I'm praying for her, Agam Berger. She's there all alone right now. And she said, is this reality? Is this real life? Because she had been in the dark and alone for so long that she was losing touch with reality. These are the kinds of stories that we're hearing from these young IDF girls, and we're going to hear worse stories, I think, from the men. And they're starting, I think that the first man is going to be released on Thursday, and then every future release is going to be men at this point. And we've heard really horrible horror stories of some of the things that the men went through, and I think they're even worse than what these women went through.
Bethany, there's no reason for you to know the story of Saint Teresa, but she had visions of hell, and it's a tight box. It's an absolute black, dark box. That's hell. And for me, I don't even like closed MRIs, right? I always get the open MRIs when I've got something wrong with my knee or anything over the years of running. I can't imagine it in the tunnels for 15 months.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that actually I've woken up with nightmares more times than I can count, thinking about, did their eyesight recover from being in the dark for all of these months? One of the women that was released on the first day, Daron Steinbrecher, she was mostly kept in the tunnels. You can see it in the paleness of her skin and her emotional state when she came out. I've heard that some of the men were being kept in cages inside the tunnel. So, horror on top of horror. I'm truly afraid for their mental state when they finally get their freedom, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Now, Steve Witkoff is the special envoy of President Trump to the Middle East. He made remarks yesterday at a synagogue dedication in New York, discussed on the commentary pod today, where he warned about flare-ups. I'm not worried about flare-ups. If they move off of the dime of the deal that they've agreed to, I hope Israel goes back heavy into the war. What do you think?
So I think that it was, again, I think it was good that, there was a flare up in the fact that they didn't release Arbel Yehud. She was a civilian that should have come before these IDF girls. And the fact that they didn't release her, they went back to the negotiating table, and it was a very tense day before they came back and said, not only are we going to release Arbel Yehud, we're also going to release Agam Berger and a 3rd person in addition to the Saturday releases, and also we're going to give you the list of who's alive and who's dead. That's something they've been asking for 15 months. All of those victories was because Hamas knew for the first time that the strength of the American government was going to come down on them very hard if they didn't stick to the agreement. And lo and behold, it's the same thing that happened with Colombia. When you have someone at the other end of the negotiating table who you trust that they will go hard at you, you capitulate much faster.
On that note, I will leave it there. I think you're absolutely right, Bethany Mandel. Follow Bethany at Bethany Shondark. That's her, before she got married, name, Bethany Shondark on X. Thank you, Bethany. Juan Williams has been a friend of mine for I don't know how long, but he's got a brand new book out right now. New prize for These Eyes, which I strongly recommend for anyone who wants to understand the rise of America's second civil rights movement. Hello, Juan. How are you?
Well, I am happy and grateful to Hugh Hewitt for taking the time with an old friend's book. Thank you, Hugh.
Well, I want to begin. The new prize for These Eyes begins with Michael Brown and Ferguson 2014. So every book's got to have a beginning. Why'd you pick Michael Brown? Because that's pretty controversial.
It is. And here's the thing. It really is about Barack Obama, the first black president, who gave a speech 10 years earlier in 2004 at the Democratic National Convention in which he said, we're not a black America, white America, Latino, Asian. We are the United States of America. We're one country. And it introduced this concept, Hugh, and I say this to you as a very thoughtful guy, of a post-racial America, that we were going into a new phase of thinking about race. And the previous years, since the first civil rights movement of the mid-20th century, most of the leading black speakers, they're thinking here, Jesse Jackson, for example, they always spoke in terms of, slavery, discrimination, bias, kind of what black people have gone through. Here comes this Barack Obama guy, and he's got optimism and forward looking. And, he says, my story wouldn't have been possible in any other country but the United States of America. And then he goes on to be elected president. And again, just stunning. It was a black man as president. But
now, Juan, I was actually in the Fleet Center when then State Senator Barack Obama blew the top off with that speech. I learned from New Prize for These Eyes that Jennifer Granholm, the governor then of Michigan and future Secretary of Energy for President Biden, was supposed to be the keynote. I did not know that till I read New Prize for These Eyes. You know how close history came to not being made that night?
Unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. I love it when, this sounds self-serving, but I mean, when books do that for you, when they say, oh my God, look at how, the two roads, split at that moment, you say, wow, history is fascinating.
Yeah. Now, this book is a review of the new era of civil rights, and I think it actually begins with that speech. But one thing I didn't see in here, and I did the full read on Saturday and Sunday, I don't think I missed it. Chief Justice Roberts in the Seattle School District case in 2007 writes, the way to end discrimination based on race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. I thought that was kind of a milestone, that's what we needed to get to. Have we gone backwards since the Chief Justice wrote that in 2007?
Right. So, what's interesting about that is clearly the court is kind of a backdrop because of the 54 decision. Then you come forward and affirmative action, becomes part of the agenda in the 1970s. And then you come forward and it's not only Chief Justice Roberts, but others, some of the more liberal justices who say affirmative action at that point is going to be done in 25 years, if you remember, Hugh.
Justice O'Connor wrote that, yep.
Correct. And so what you have is a sense of we're in a change period, and then Obama emerges with this talk of a post-racial America. And you just asked me, have we gone backwards from his promise that we go to a race-neutral America? I would say that we just haven't made progress on becoming race-neutral because, I think that a lot of the lament that you get from people in Black Lives Matter, which from having read the book, you'll know, I think is a major force and is one of the keys to the second movement. They would say, well, we still are dealing with so many problems that are race related when it comes to inequality. And the one that stands out in recent history would be the police and black men, the George Floyd case in Minneapolis, 2020. But then there's also, even as I'm speaking to you, discussions about diversity, equity, inclusion, and President Trump going after him, saying he doesn't think that that is the agenda. He thinks that, in fact, undoing that will help us get towards what Justice Roberts was talking about.
And we're going to come right back from break because Juan and I always get along, but we don't always agree. And we disagree on some things in this book. So don't go anywhere, America. I'm coming right back with Juan Williams' brand new book, New Prize for These Eyes, in bookstores and at Amazon.com. It'll be on the hashtag, or it'll be in my YouTube channel as well. So go and find it there for if you missed part of this interview. Juan's got a great new book, New Prize for These Eyes, which I read this weekend. Subtitle, The Rise of America's Second Civil Rights Movement. I want to go to page 31, quote, Obama's political calling card was the open face, not the angry face of a black man.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. In fact, I wrote a column for, I don't know, could have been the Post, could have been someone on his inauguration day saying, I don't like his policies, but I'm awfully glad to see a black man taking the oath of office. But did Obama end up making race relations worse? Juan Williams.
This is intriguing. Hugh, when I look at this, I remember that I said to you, Obama introduced to many Americans this idea of let's move beyond race. Let's go post-racial and see if we can heal the racial division in the country. And then when he is inaugurated as the first black president, he says, I'm not the black president. I'm the president of the United States of America. I'm the president of all the people. A lot of black people, especially younger blacks, though, thought, well, he's the first black president. Why isn't he, doing immediate kind of urgent action to help black America? And there was a lot of disappointment, disillusionment. Then Trayvon Martin happens, Henry Louis Gates with the policeman in Cambridge, and a lot of people said, oh, that's the black president taking the side of the black guy versus the law enforcement community. And I noticed that after he said, in the case of Henry Louis Gates, the Harvard professor, that the police behaved stupidly, that his approval rating never once again got beyond 50% with white Americans. So when you ask me, did he make it better or worse? In fact, I think there was a lot of churning, a lot of agitation, and a lot of second thoughts about, well, I don't know about this black president. Whoa, black president, not president. And subsequent to that, we get Donald Trump, and may be a reaction to Barack Obama.
I subscribe to Axelrod's view that we temperamentally go back and forth between presidents, and the least temperamentally like Barack Obama is Donald Trump. But I wonder, later on in the book, you write, Donald Trump, his success on prison reform notwithstanding. Now, that was a big deal, Juan. That was a big deal on page 123. Do you give Trump enough credit for being good on race?
Do I give him enough credit? I'm very hopeful. If Trump wants to get on board with a second movement, you know what? I'm in the forefront, the vanguard of people welcoming him. You're right. I think that prison reform was a good thing to do, especially he had to go up against Jeff Sessions, then his attorney general, who was opposed to it. But if you recall, Jared Kushner's son-in-law was a big proponent, and it helped people, especially those who were in jail for, the crack cocaine versus powder cocaine, all that kind of stuff. But on the bigger issue, I go back to your earlier question about Obama, Hugh. I think that when you start thinking about things like Charlottesville and, extremist sort of white militia groups that emerged during that period and the whole notion of replacement theory, I find it very disquieting and upsetting. But I think it's important that we understand that just as Make America Great Again and Trump are really significant forces in American life, Black Lives Matter and the whole push on what people perceive to be police brutality, but then subsequently came to diversity, equity, inclusion, is also a powerful force. And I think Trump is in the midst of this. And I wish, as I said to you, I would be greeting him at the door if he wants to get involved in doing more progressive things on the race relations front.
Now, I want my audience to know that if they buy New Prize for These Eyes, they're going to get a very fair assessment of every major incident beginning with, of course, Michael Brown, but also Eric Garner. We're also going to go through the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd and everything. But I'm not in total agreement with one. I want to lay this out here. I thought the 1619 Project, which you correctly note, was not without its detractors, was deeply flawed. And I also think that Black Lives Matter started out well, but it cratered with credibility issues on their financial transparency. You're kind of very, very transparent about that. Do you think they
I was hoping you'd give me credit because I think I'm pretty critical of their lack of transparency, even their corruption.
Yes, you are. And so that leads me to, let's get my big argument with you out of the way, then we'll come back to the little argument. A new Confederate movement. Hillary Clinton on this radio and then now television program told me that her maximum number of white supremacists in the United States was 600,000. That's less than 1% of the country. Is there really a new Confederate movement, Juan?
A new Confederate movement? Well, obviously, if you have a Confederate flag being carried through the Capitol of the United States on January 6, 2021, something's going on. But I think that there is, you know, Hugh, I would put it to you this way. There's a lot of nostalgia about white majority and dominance in terms of American culture in this country. And when you think about things like the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, that's really evidence of them playing a role. You know, Trump saying stand back, stand by when he was asked about white militias, Trump being endorsed by the Klan, the whole nostalgia again about Confederate monuments. I think that you'd have to say, I don't know where Hillary Clinton got that kind of metric measure from. But to me, the big point is you have a lot of people who believe in so-called replacement theory with immigration. They say, oh, they're bringing these people in because they're going to vote Democratic or something like that. Hopefully not eat their pets. And then you also have people who say, you know what? We don't let the Jews replace us. Remember, they were marching with the tiki.
Oh, the whole
torches
Charlottesville
down in
thing. We got to go to a
Charlottesville.
break here, Juan. I want to talk to you more about Charlottesville after I give you a hard time in the next segment. So we got 2 more segments, but you're right that Charlottesville was awful, but I got to give you a hard time about a couple of things. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back with Juan Williams on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The Hugh Hewitt Show is now available on TV. Go to SalemNewsChannel.com or download the app. You can also watch on Roku and Fire Stick. Salem News Channel, the antidote to the mainstream media. Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. Go to myphdweightloss.com to learn more.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns in 5 seconds.
Welcome back. I'm with Juan Williams. If you want to get an extra burst of Juan, I'm going to keep him around for a few minutes after this last segment. And today, I just wanted to hit you up on page 85, Juan, when you said you're talking about Kate Steinle and her murder, and quote, conservative talk radio told the story of her murder as proof of the need to put more federal agents on the nation's southern border, close quote. I have never, ever mentioned that lady and her death and her murder on the, conservative talk radio is a big, broad, sweeping thing. Juan, you got to be careful there.
You're right. My apology. But I will tell you that conservative talk radio, Hugh Hewitt at the, at the vanguard of this, is a powerful force in American society going back to Rush Limbaugh, Hugh.
Yes.
And I don't, when I say it's in broad sweep, because there's so many strong voices that come to America as conservative talk radio, and I can go through them, but you're involved here, and if you didn't do it, I apologize.
All right. I was just gigging you, because I know that that's something that is shorthand for some people. Let's talk about Christopher Rufo, who's been a guest on my show. I loved his book, America's Cultural Revolution. I think he provided the architecture for the rollback of DEI. Do you admire him, or are you worried about him?
I worry because it's so powerful. And at the moment, with President Trump winning a second term, President Trump is basically acting on Christopher Rufo's agenda.
Oh, yes.
And I don't think that there is an agenda that is so far-reaching that does not deserve some scrutiny and some second thoughts. For example, we just saw Pete Hegseth win confirmation, I should say, to be Secretary of Defense. And he has been hell on wheels about DEI in the military. Let's stop and think about this for a second. In fact, the military has been a prime example of how we've made progress on race in America, and it's done it through merit. You have got to be good at your job and move forward. The issue is not quotas or putting people in positions they're not ready to execute. The issue had been one of people being denied opportunity on the basis of race. That's the sad history. And now, what am I reading? I'm reading, Hugh, just this weekend, that the Air Force is no longer going to teach about the Tuskegee Airmen, young black people who came to fight in a segregated unit during World War II. And I think,
the Tuskegee Airmen are heroes. B, I don't think the Air Force Academy was well-intentioned there. I think that's called over-compliance in order to create controversy, because they're not going to do that. I think whoever was running the DEI office at the Air Force Academy is mad that they're losing their job or getting demoted or something. I'm going to come back for one more segment with Juan, which you can hear on the YouTube channel or on the podcast today, because the truth is civil rights activism is never finished. That's a direct quote of Juan. And I want to make sure you all get a better chance of hearing about new prize for these eyes than 3 over-the-air segments on the Hugh Hewitt Show.